I think any entrepreneur would ultimately say that happens a lot and kind of all the time, in little ways. The most difficult part, the most difficult thing has been in the journey of when we embraced on the second part of the Waratek life cycle, the Waratek journey, to productize our own research and turn it into real product and then give it to the bank as a finished product, or the users, the organizations as a finished product. And that was kind of one painful transition point, because you had to bring your shareholder base and your mentor base and your believer base with you. You had to bring them with you. And then the second point is, when we got to the point as companies are, where you've been working on the product, you've been building it up, it's fantastic, it's coming together, it's taken longer than you originally hoped, and so you're leaning on people's patience, you're leaning on people's belief, and probably that's really the most difficult. And really, in the last 18 months, in some ways, have been the most difficult, because you're so close. You've got the product, you've got the technology, it's missing this little bell, it's missing that little whistle, and yet you need to keep the faith from the shareholders, you need to keep the faith from the investors, you need to keep the faith from the early customers you're engaging with. And no, we can fix that in a month. You'll have that in 2 months, and that's really been probably the most difficult. And really, it was 2011, 2012, just when we were at that crossover point where we just about have the product working, and just about at the point people can start to use it in anger and start to play with it. I mean, 2012, just as a whole calendar year, was just the turning point, the transition point for Waratek. We had the first customer who used version 1.0 of our product, a very early form of the product, and they started using that in January, February here in London last year. And that was the first time somebody outside of Waratek had used it in production with live traffic, with a live workload, and they were giving thumbs up that it worked. And a huge, incredible feeling, and that first little, and no matter how much money it was in terms of a customer engagement, it was the first time. And then 2012 just started to become a takeoff year, and 3 months after that first customer tried it, we made the product available for public download on the website for a beta trial. That had all sorts of people downloading it from different institutions around the world. Then a couple of months after that, we launched the full GA product at the JavaOne conference in San Francisco. That was only in October last year, and then it's just gone up like this. As people hear the problem we're solving, everybody has this problem, there's no solution, and you've got a product now, and there are people who are starting to use it. The investor relations is a very important part of the business. Investors are a very important part of any business. They're particularly important for us because it's been such a long journey to productize this technology, and we have such a large base. And that's almost a day-to-day job, is to make sure that we keep that relationship strong. We keep everybody kind of in the loop with what's going on, and particularly now as things are starting to really take traction and take flight in the market, that becomes a far easier job, because they don't need to look at the notices that we send them. They can open up the newspaper and they can see something in the newspaper about us without us having to email them and say, hey, look at this result we're getting. So that's fabulous. We're still a tiny company. I mean, we have a team of about 20 people in Dublin. We have a team of another 10 engineers outside of Dublin. We have offices. So our head research office is in Dublin. We are an Irish incorporated company, but we now have our business development office here in London. We have 2 offices here in London, one in Canary Wharf, one in Bishopsgate, to serve the 2 financial centres of London. We, late last year, opened up an office in New York, appointed our first executive in New York. We have a kind of a very small presence in Australia, more historical at this stage. And as we look forward, we're now starting to plan out the roadmap on the quarters as where we open up the offices to engage with customers. The market opportunity we want to solve and we target is a market pain point that the industry has. And this is a pain point that essentially every large organisation has. It doesn't matter whether they're a bank or a telco, retail, software company. Anyone that runs a lot of applications in the servers and data centers have a problem where the majority of their applications, or a large part, are written in something called Java programming language. And these server applications, people are recognizing in the last 12, 18 months, they don't run well in server environments. And what our value proposition is, many years ago, 10 years ago, another company called VMware came to market, invented this technology called virtualization, and they applied it at the hardware level, and that drove up the efficiency of operating systems and way operating systems could run on hardware. And they did a fantastic job. And today, VMware is a star company in the industry. But they stopped there. And virtualization techniques didn't go any further up the stack. And so we enter the picture by taking those VMware techniques and driving them right to the top of the software stack. And when we do that, the value proposition we can bring is for all those customers who haven't been able to benefit from VMware's solutions for increasing efficiency for Java applications. We can bring the same kind of efficiency or greater efficiencies and kind of continue the journey that VMware begun and continue the solution that VMware brought and take that to the rest of the market. And that's an enormous market. That's billions of dollars a year in terms of spend by large organizations on running their server-side software, their server applications, their business-critical applications, and so forth. That's a real challenge. I mean, the challenges there are just being such a small company and yet trying to support and stand up all these customer engagements now in different continents around the world. You're called on to do multiple roles. You're called on to context switch all the time. 2 hours on this, 3 hours on that. Work outside of business hours. Work on the weekend. This is all par for course in working in Waratek today because it's what's required to meet the requirements and the deliverables and meet the expectations that people have of us supporting these important applications and important projects in big companies. We have to pretend to be a large company, really. We have to be a virtual large company. The main points I would say is be prepared for a long journey. Be prepared to believe in yourself and believe in what you're doing for that long period of time. And be prepared to look for people to bring on board as soon as you can to fill in your gaps, because there are going to be gaps in you and your team. Your own expertise mightn't be good enough in different areas. You mightn't have the networks, you mightn't have the context, you mightn't have the skills. And I think the biggest challenge for startups and the biggest need for startups is to bring in the intellect and bring in the experience that startups by definition do not have. They lack that. That's what makes a startup. And I think that's the biggest challenge being a startup, and that's the biggest hurdle to overcome when you're a startup, is to bring that in. Because once you start to have that, you start to be able to deal with the pressures and the pains far easier than when you don't.